Alright, we're getting near another evening of work, and we've got some changes that have developed on the motor. So let's look at a couple of them and we'll talk through what we've seen so far. So that's a little bit of a change. Yeah, motor is back in the truck. We've got starter on, which means, it's hard to see back there, we got the transmission on. I'll roll under and we'll go through a couple of things of what we've seen on this, but this was last Thursday, tonight's Monday, a whole night getting the motor back on. And so now I'm gonna get working on, for one of the last big things of the evening, is exhaust manifolds back up. We got a gasket, I've got my anti-seize, I've got that. So with these motors, you've got two completely different looking manifolds. That's the driver's side, that's the passenger side. It's really hard to get them mixed up. You've also got two different sizes of bolts. You've got a longer bolt and a shorter bolt. The shorter bolt goes on top through the top set of holes. The longer one goes through the bottom into the block on each side. So I've got them separated. I've got the long ones here, got the short ones here. They're all 9/16. We've also got anti-seize. So this is nickel anti-seize lubricant to put on all the bolts. So it's going to be messy, but it'll be all right. And I've got these guys coated with exhaust paint. Exhaust manifold paint's good to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. I still expect some of that to cook off just because it's not the greatest. It's just off the shelf stuff. So, but we're gonna get these on, and then we'll walk through a couple other things I've learned as we put the motor in and did some work on that. Okay, so there we go. Exhaust manifolds are on. Let's see, we got the starter on to the bell housing, transmission's behind that. This is the speedometer cable. I've got that hooked on. Not certain about the placement of that guy up here on top. We'll have to look at that. But carburetor's on. I need to get a little bit of vacuum, quarter-inch vacuum tube here. Throttle cable's hooked up, but it's not through yet. It's got to go through the firewall there. But my transmission kickdown rod is on and hooked up to the transmission, so that's awesome. Hadn't really showed you guys the fan belt. So for these motors with the standard alternator setup, without AC, without power steering, the auto parts store, their computer says a 45-inch by 3/8 belt is the way to go. That's too long. It's all the way out at the end of your adjuster. This is a 44 1/4. There's one more size in between. You could go with that one as well, but 45 is too long. You don't get enough adjuster on your alternator bracket there. So we've got fuel line run and plumbed up into the carb. Had to do some finagling with it. And this vacuum line, they look like they're real close here, and they are, but they're not actually touching. This is the vacuum line for the vacuum advance coming off of this, and we got the choke cable coming through here and hooked onto the butterfly. So now it's working. You pull it in the cab and it closes, and things are in good shape there. So I'm liking the look of that. So very cool. And these now there's a gasket here, you can see there, the metal gasket on the exhaust manifold size. When these were built, this gap was machined such that they didn't have gaskets coming from the factory, but our gasket technology's of course gotten a little bit better, and we've gotten, foil metal gaskets that'll compress and that'll help prevent exhaust leaks. So I'm all for that. So we got those in, and yeah, this one back here that sets up in there would have been good to do that when the motor was still on the stand, but as I was telling my father-in-law, I kind of had to do that one. There's another one on the other side where you're doing the old blind man in a nudist colony routine and just feeling your way along. What we did find as we were hanging the motor is that we had to flip our motor mounts around. So if you get the same type of motor mounts that we've got here, there's a metal tab on one side of it. On this side of it, there's a metal tab that comes down around the neoprene rubber there. That metal tab goes to the back. When we put these on the first time, it was for the front, and when we did that, the transmission brace at the back on the cross member wouldn't made up. Flipped them around, lifted the motor back up, flipped them around, everything settled down just fine. So watch for that. And if someone doesn't have this style but wants the measurements on how far, say, from the the front of this metal bracket to the front of that, I can snap a measurement and get that to someone here pretty quick. If someone needs that, let me know. The old filter's got to get changed out because I got another one ready to go on there. So that's what I've learned there with those pieces. I don't have the shift linkage hooked up yet, but that's one of the next big things to come, is a shift linkage on everything. So let's show you what I got done underneath. So we have the drive shaft hooked up. We're hooked up back here at the pumpkin. I've got my headlight on to try and shine a little light on the subject here. So got our U-joints in, and make sure that your U-joint sets real tight on these dogs. There's a little bitty metal dog right here on each side. Make sure it sets all the way there. So that went in nicely there. We got our carrier bearing, everything hooked up and snugged back up. My father-in-law points out that you always, no matter what, if you are working on one of these things up on stands, up on jack stands, you do not tighten down this carrier bearing housing until all four wheels are on the ground, because otherwise you mess up the geometry of the shaft as it's going into your pumpkin. Things will bind, you'll break a rear end. So my tip to you all from Terry, we didn't really have much of an option because wheels are on the ground. We got a bottle jack here. We were using that for the transmission pieces. We were working on that, but watch for those pieces there. Front of the drive shaft is all hooked on and in good shape there. This is a transmission vacuum line that comes off of the transmission, and it bolts onto one of the bolts of the bell housing. Don't forget that, like I did, and have to take a bolt out of the bell housing right there against the firewall to rehang this bracket with this thing. So, and then you get the same bit of 1/4 inch vacuum line tubing that'll connect those two together. You can see the kick down rod hooked on there. That's the vertical black piece there hooked up to the transmission. The shift linkage goes outside of that, so that's coming. And again, this right here is the transmission brace, transmission mount to that cross brace, that if you have your engine mounts backwards like we did, you will not be able to get this thing to settle down onto there. You'll maybe get the tip of it over, but you will not be able to get it to set down, to set onto there, and to get tight. So a little bit of what I've learned, and we've gotten a lot of parts back on the truck over the past 2 sessions. So we're at leaps and bounds here, you see the puddle there. We still haven't replaced that brake line that had the flare that's cracked back there. We still got to get that before we get too much of an oil slick back here. So hopefully that's going. We're on our way. Next up, finish up things at the front, then get the doors loaded with their frames and glass and get them on. Gotta get some exhaust on it before, and the wiring on everything, because otherwise, if we start up right now without the exhaust on, I'm gonna cook my firewall. Not interested in doing that. So thanks for watching. Good luck on your projects. Wish me luck on mine. Addendum on this on the video for tonight after the motor of Terry has been working doing a trim job for his brother for a house here in town that they're adding an addition, and this is one of the doors that they sent out for him to work on. He's got stain, got a couple coats of sandy sealer on it. Now look really closely down that door. Can you see the bow in that? There it is. Oh, I told Terry when he showed me that, I said, Terry, I have seen John boats flatter on the bottom than that. Between that, he also found every one of these doors has a little flaw. They've got a crack. And if you look at the anatomy of the door, it's where this rod, the style rod, kind of lines. There's a crack in every single one of these doors on these finishes where some glue has come through. Here's the one on this door. And here's the one on this door. And it's all at the same spot. What a mess. And these are just hollow core doors. One of them he was sanding, the veneer was so thin you could see the texture of the honeycomb matrix that's between it on the sanding. So guys and gals, if you're going to buy a hollow core door, at least have the decency to buy one that's fiberglass, because this oak stuff is garbage for the most part. Get something solid. Get something other than one of these oak hollow core sort of interior doors. They're even a mess. Some of these ones he saw had just huge voids. Here it is. Here's one. Huge voids around the lock hole. Look at that. You could destroy the veneer of that door if you squeeze down a doorknob too high, or even just the eventual wear and tear, push and pull at that. Say if this door happened to end up where it was sticky, you'll crater that and it'll crack right there. What a mess. Terry could put a beautiful finish on stuff. This is sanded, not a final finish on it. But man, this is taking a sow's ear and trying to make a silk purse. Whew.